to the Mike Cook Guys podcast, run by pretty much your double champion, your IWGP Intercontinental WCW US Heavyweight Champion, aka the biggest icon in podcasting, aka the Voice of Woodbridge, and you better believe it. So, before I start tonight's episode, I just want to say this is basically take 2 of what the original episode was, but at the same time, I'm glad that I'm redoing it because of technical difficulties, but at the same time, I felt like I didn't get everything I wanted to get across in terms of information. But before we get down to the nitty gritty, I just want to say for the record, for those who are watching the podcast on Facebook Live, the pre-shows, I just want to say that every episode will now have a pre-show, and it will be hosted by not only myself, but a good friend of mine, colleague Paul Tarango, who most of you, if you're on my Facebook friends list, he's under the name Tom Tucker. That's legit. He put his name under as Tom Tucker as a way to hide his, I guess you can say, identity. I thought it was pretty funny, but I think the main reason why he did that was for other reasons too. But tonight's episode, I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna hit pretty close to home because it will pretty much mention status quo of a topic that not only did it spark an interest, but at the same time, it's kind of like opening Pandora's box. So, these days in 2019, and it's been like this for years and years and years, so many things people aren't open about because it's afraid it will strip their masculinity. And whether it's things as dating or going out or just things in general. Like, if you don't do this, you're not a real man. Or if you do stuff like this, you're a punk. Like, I get scolded of my masculinity just for things like getting my eyebrows waxed and, getting pedicures done because I work 7 days a week. I gotta take care of my feet. But this one's more of a deeper subject. It's more like mental health. And a lot of people are like, well, how does that relate to masculinity? Easy. It relates to how men are on a daily basis. It's that pride we carry, that stubbornness, that machismo, because we're too stubborn to do certain things. So a lot of people don't know. I suffer from what is called concealed depression. And I'm not saying that for attention. Like, this has been going on since February. And, it's from when I was working myself into an exhaustion. And, when I went back home and my health was, deteriorating. It was just declining. I'm, going to sleep and I can't breathe and I have to use a CPAP. And at first, I was too, stubborn to go get it checked out. So, part of me felt like I needed to get my head checked out because of certain moments and certain aspects. And through tests, scenarios, explaining about my life, even though part of me felt like I was wasting time with this specialist because I felt like, hey man, you got all these degrees and all that, and you don't know shit about me. So I ended up recently giving it a second try through my job, which is a job that I won't mention the name, but they have it where they offer, free counseling sessions with any provider that you want. Now, I will say this. Those who never heard of concealed depression, it's not like any other depression. It's not your typical depression. It's honestly kind of worse. You could go as far as saying it's like bipolar light, but it still had that same destructive nature in certain things. Like certain things will trigger you to where you're very angry, you're very sad, you're very confused as to why. It just hits hard. And you hide it behind this mask and you do it so well and you play it off in front of people and they don't even know that deep down inside you're hurting. And people, I'm hurting. I just never expose it because of me having this image of always being this big, tough guy, or the image of just, being just a strong person. And, most of the women, they jokingly say, but it's like a teddy bear with very fragile feelings, and I don't let it show. And because of that, I don't, because I would be afraid of how people would look at my, how they would question my masculinity. I mean, I've already dealt with that enough growing up, and I'm not going into that. But it really does, it does eat you up inside as a person. And anyone who knows me, they know I do a lot of research on things. The moment I find something, I soak it up because you guys tell me the same effort that I use in knowing pro wrestling, I should do it with things that I end up learning and just expand. And that's what I did. And I ended up joining this group, and I mentioned about my situations and the replies that I got from people, because I checked everything like Mayo Clinic, WebMD, groups on social media, different forums. I mentioned a post about it, and I've had like 32 responses of how they endure it every day. And they have, I've gotten some replies where, and I pretty much said men only, not women. And it's no offense to the women. I just say, I just want to know, how is it from a male's point of view? One guy was like, he's a teacher, but he'll never eat lunch in the staff room with his colleagues. He just needs that time to recharge for the remainder of the day just by being alone. And it's crazy. And it's, there was others that's like, hey, Mike, I'm going through this. Like, for example, I'm at work and, I'm this, nice guy and all that. And, my friends want to make plans of hanging out. And then at the last minute, I would pretend saying I would get a headache or I have something else to do. But then the morning after, I regret it, And then some people are like, I isolate myself from life and social media because it's too hard to deal with interaction with people because you're hiding that mask and it's you're being something you're not in public. And one person was like, sometimes they have suicidal thoughts and it haunts them, and they stay busy and they stay busy and they stay busy just to block it out. And one person was like, he's constantly late for work, but the reason why he's late is not because of traffic, but it's because he don't want to leave his room because he feels like these feelings of depression are pinning him down. And it's like the one that caught me the most. One person said they catch themselves in fictional worlds, like based on what they read or what they watch or what video games they play, or and it makes sense because I'm this big wrestling fan. And there's moments where when I talk to people, or if I got something to get off my chest, even Mom Duke say it one time too. Mom was like, you sound like you're cutting a promo as a wrestler, the way that you're getting your frustration out. And I thought it was so crazy. And then there was one that really hit the nail on the head when they said, They hide behind a rigidly controlled mask, and they don't maintain contact with anyone that isn't directly involved in their life. And they felt like because it would affect them as in a love life, because they feel like they're lonely and they want to be with someone, but then when they got someone with them, they don't want to be with them because they're afraid that the more that they open up to them, the faster they will leave. And I can relate to that, because I remember listening to this song, and it's from an old album by Vanessa Dow. She mentioned, my love for you will push you away because you're not used to being loved this much. And it's very hard because I've mentioned it before on past podcasts, and I mentioned it out of like anger. How, I feel like I'm wearing a mask at work, and when I get home, it's just like I feel like I'm the most miserable person. I don't want to go out. I don't want to do these things. And I just, I feel so lonely. And even when people that come over to hang out, I don't feel like they came over to be legit. I think they just come over to just, hey man, what are you cooking, dog? Because once you cook for them, then they end up leaving. You do have exceptions, but from, past experiences, that's how they are. They eat, then they leave. Well, you don't mind because it's company, but then at the same time, the back of your mind, you feel like, am I being used? Am I being played? Like, I don't know. And because of that, I just figure I just don't in general, And originally I did stuff like this podcast just to unload my thoughts and what's on my mind, because I felt like if I say it to people, would they really pay attention? Would they really understand? Would they really, really understand how I feel and where I'm coming from? And part of me doesn't feel that. And I could be wrong. I could absolutely be wrong. But 9 out of 10 times when I go with my gut, it's not. And it does make me wonder because of the current situation that I'm in. The current woman that I'm trying to talk to. And her situation. This woman knows I want to be with her. But at the same time, certain things, it's like, not saying that she's a broken person, but looking at my track record, most of the women I've been with has some type of broken, segment of them. And, it's that hero's complex. It's that, feeling like you want to be there for that person because, you feel like you can put the pieces together. But I've learned from like past women, they had so much going on, and I was looking for, companionship in all the wrong ways and all the wrong places. And the funny part is, with this current person, I feel like I understand where she's coming from, and moments that I've opened up, she understands where I'm coming from. And it's so crazy. I'm not used to that. We're both not used to certain things. She's not used to, being treated the way she deserved. And I'm not used to someone giving me that type of assurance of, hey, you're not wasting your time. You're not, this or that. This is just a situation. I'm not used to that. And because of that, most people are like, well, if that's what she says, then hey, keep going. And I'm like, yeah. And I remember Friday, I like really, really opened up to her. And And I haven't done it in so long, but the only difference was there was no disappointment as the outcome. And maybe that's one of those things I realized, like, from my past. Maybe I dealt with these type of women that were crazy and at first seemed nice but were manipulative, but I was so blind to stay with it because maybe it was because I didn't want to be alone. Maybe I didn't want to be lonely. Because let's face it, even though I'm around all these people at work, and a huge part of me feels like I hide behind this mask of security and being, happy and nice all the time, when really by the time I get home, that long ride, it just feels it feels longer than it does going home than it does going to work. And yeah, people do contact me outside of work, and I talk to them, but it's just like at the end of the day, when I get to that apartment, it's like, yeah, I got all this space, but it's so hard feeling alone, and it's a different type of lonely. It's one of those type of lonelies that make you sit and think, and when the gears start turning, it puts you in a really dark, sunken place that I don't want to be. And even though they're like, well, just find, more outputs and more habits. Yeah, I got the gym and all that, but I've also learned being at the gym so much was what made me at my most highest insecure. And this is where, once again, the masculinity factor is really put in question, because the one thing that I learned from training with them and changing my whole body and the whole aspect, you don't have to be on drugs to be addicted. But I realized that male bodybuilders and just bodybuilders in general, yeah, they give you the image on social media that they're happy and all that, but from what I've seen, they're the most insecure people, the most sensitive. And I'm not saying sensitive as in like, you say something to them and their feelings are hurt and they're like, hurting. It's just the moment they see something that's not right, it hurts them a whole lot. And I remember seeing guys who will put in 4 or 5, 6 hours in the gym and will just overload their body with weights and training and all these other regimens, and you see muscles on top of muscles and shit bulging, and it just blew your mind, and you're like looking at them like, dude, this is amazing how your body's developed. And they turn and they look at you like, not really. There's still more work to do. There's still more work to do. And I'm like, dude, where? And I remember when I really got sucked into it, I was the same way. I was like, just a bit more, just a bit more. Like, I've seen people that will get so frustrated. I don't see them for a couple of weeks, and then when they come back, they are ultra mega fucking ripped. And I remember doing that same thing, and that was from taking stuff like, Superdrol and Dianabol and, estrogen blockers just so I can, cut weight and produce muscle. And I was doing all the crazy eating regimens, and, it was putting myself in such a bad depression to where I'll never forget it. One night, I was home alone, and my parents were out of town, so I was watching the house. And I was in such a dark place. I wasn't happy, because the main reason I was going through that phase was because I got out of a breakup, and the woman pretty much told me, you're a good guy and all that, I just don't like big men. I don't find you attractive big. So it motivated me to cut all this weight. And you figure, going through all of that situations and all that training where you're coming in from 10 o'clock at night until 2 or 3 in the morning, training, and room to spare, because you still got room to like go to sleep and wake up like nothing happened just so you can get up and go to work. It was a very tiresome process because I wasn't happy with myself. I felt that way. And that night, even with the weight loss and the muscles and the shoulders, I was even more depressed and unhappy and unsatisfied with how I look. And I'll never forget it. I was ready to take my spare gun that I had right after passing my concealed weapons permit. You know, there was a second gun that was kept in the house that was in my room. And I was getting ready to load it up, and I had it pulled back on the chamber, and right as soon as I was getting ready to pull that trigger, and I had this one song, and I'll never forget it. It was The Kiss by Kelly Ali. For those who remember Sneaker Pimps, she was the original lead singer. And I had that song on repeat, crying my eyes out. As soon as I had that thing locked and ready to go, I put it right to my head, and as soon as I was getting ready to pull that trigger, the door knocked. And I paused for a moment. They knocked and I stopped. I waited till they stopped knocking, and they stopped knocking. And then I cut that music right back up. And as soon as I was getting ready to do it again, the knocking beat was beating harder. And it was my friend from Thailand who was running a restaurant and store and all that. And he stopped by after he got off work, and he was like, something wanted me to talk to you. Something I felt that I needed to talk to you. And he was like, you know, I don't like this new mic. You know, you work out, you go to the gym. That's cool. But you changed so much. You're not the big happy guy that I met. He said, what happened to Big Mike? What the fuck happened to Big Mike? And I just sat there in tears, and I was like, I don't know. I said, I just wasn't happy with how I looked before because of what, you know, such and such did to me. And then he's like, what? Because you're big? But you're happy, right? You were happy being a big guy. You know, hung out with you, you know. And he was just going on talking to me. And that next day, I'll never forget it. I took all those syringes and all those, you know, medications, and I trashed it. And I put it in a separate bag, and I got rid of it. So, it's just one of those things where, yeah, because of masculinity, I used my stubbornness and my false masculinity to what I thought, my false theory of what masculinity really was. And I buried it just to, you know, assuage that relief of pain. Because people don't know, every day I go through so much pain. And I don't talk to it about people, because when you have something such as, you know, habits of concealed depression, it's one of those depressions that you don't brag about to people. It's one of those things you would never know unless you feel comfortable enough to tell someone. The ones that talk about it all the time, bragging about it, they're not depressed. They just want attention from people. Prime example of people that have concealed depression. The actor Robin Williams. He was the poster child of concealed depression, and nobody knew about it. Because you don't know what they're going through until tragedy hits. And that's what happened with him. Tragedy hit, and then all of a sudden, people found out, hey, he has that. Why didn't we know? Because he hid it so well. He layered it. And I'm sure there's other, you know, celebrities. You know, personally, I think up before his death, not even because of the concussions. Chris Benoit had it too. Because he lost his best friend, he wasn't the same. He lost a couple of best friends in that same time frame. So it eats at you. It consumes you. It's hurting you. And there's moments where it's like, all I want to be is just happy. Like even earlier at work, I stepped out for a moment. I just couldn't stop crying. I was just crying. I was crying. And one of my good close friends texted me. She's like, What's wrong, Mike? I said, I just don't know. I kept sending crying emojis because I just couldn't talk. And she's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, it just hurts. It just hurts. It just hurts what I'm going through. And I hate having to wear this mask because I don't want people to think that, hey, what's going on with Mike? Is Mike okay? Did I do something wrong in front of Mike? You know, this ain't like Mike. This isn't the image of Mike that we know. But this is. I just don't expose it because I don't want people to know that I am this person who is hurting and miserable inside. Because when you really look at the key points of this type of situation, you have to look at the key points. Such as, for example, credit goes to the HuffPost, which is like a health website. And I bookmark all these things just so I can remind myself how to deal with it, how to cope with it, because I don't want to do medication. I really don't. I don't want to be a zombie. I don't want to lose my libido. You know, I don't want to go through that. So, just a few things that will catch someone's attention. And after I mention it, then you'll start putting two and two together and be like, oh shit, this is what Mike's going through. So for starters, how can you tell? They may intentionally make efforts to appear okay and maybe even seem exponentially happy and upbeat. When really that's what, you know, we're giving you that image that, hey, we're happy and all that, but we're not. It's false. You know, we try to stick with the positives. You know, we don't want to be a burden to other people. That's why when people say, hey, Mike, I have your back, because of the track record of people saying that and they let me down, I don't ask, I don't call, I don't text because I don't want to be a burden on people. And that is the honest truth, you know. Now, another key point, they might have habitual remedies. They might do something where it's in the same form, the same routine, whether it's music, exercise, working, you know, just the same habit. There's nothing different. Hey, Mike, how was your weekend? Oh, I work. That's all I do, I work. If I hang out with probably one person on a regular, it'd be, you know, my buddy Iron Mike and Manassas. But that's really it. Like, maybe there's a couple people once in a while that'll stop in and say, hey, but it's not the same, you know. And it's just one of those ways of trying to conquer it, you know. Here's another key point. They have trouble with abandonment. One of the inside jokes that you people laugh at, and I say it out of humor when really it's true, you know, hey man, I have abandonment issues because I'm so used to being abandoned. And that's why I feel like when people say, hey, when it comes to relationships, the right one will come to you. And I don't believe that because, you know, we're in this situation where, let's be honest, does love really exist in 2019? No. I think it's just like going to the shoe store and trying on shoes. And the ones that you really, really fall in love with, they're either taken, locked in something else, play for the other team, or it's just, you know, it's really crazy because, you know, it's a struggle. And let's just face it, there's nothing more heartbreaking than finding out your ugliest layer of yourself is too ugly for someone you love to handle. Because once you open that up, then you wonder, hey, are you going to stay or are you going to go? Most likely, you're going to go because one or two things are going to happen. You're either going to use it as a clutch against me to your advantage, or you pretty much going to stand by me and help fight through it. Just like I've always stand there and help people fight through theirs. You know? So it's just, it is what it is. And I hate hearing that phrase so much because I'm that person. I just can't accept things as they are. Like, if it's bad, I got to get rid of it. I can't just say it is what it is. I said that the last time I really meant saying it is what it is was a year ago when I found out I had cancer cells. I was like, well, it is what it is. No, I just can't do that no more. I mean, I might say it out of sarcasm, but it's not. I haven't never said it legit, and I'm going to go with the last two key points, and then I'm going to, continue on with the topic. But the next to last key point is, people with concealed depression have a very involved perception of life and death. It's one of those things where facing mortality can be depressing, and being dragged in and out of horrible mindsets can cause these kind of thoughts to be more frequent. And I can't tell you many times where I'm driving and I'm like, I wonder what happens if I let go of the wheel and just see which way I'm going to swerve, left or right. If I swerve left, I'm going to hit a car. If I swerve right, I'm going to hit a ditch or a tree. And it makes you wonder. That really legit runs in my thoughts. And it shouldn't be that way. But it does. And that's scary. And the crazy part is, the people who really, and this is the last key point I'll mention, because there's more, aside from being someone who seeks love and acceptance, which I think everyone does, or, searching for a purpose, people who have concealed depression are often very talented, a jack of all trades, They soak up interest that interests them, and they use it, and, they're easy to get, they're easy to give advice that works because it works for them, because they've tried everything around the world and then some. And it's kind of like a blessing and a curse, but it's more like a trade that's plagued because you're pretty much soaking up way too much information. Think about it. Look at all the guys that have high IQs. They have some sort of depression or some sort of anxiety. True story. It's so true. And because of that, people like that, me being one of them, we're able to formulate and we're able to illustrate beauty and positivity through the shadows of these dark clouds of emotions that we carry. And the crazy part is, you guys never notice it because we don't expose it. Now, after you listen to this and you put all these key figures together, then you're putting two and two together. It's like, holy shit, Mike is so right. He's not trying to say something that's very outlandish and asinine. No. It's legit. And it's hard for, men to seek help because we're worried about our self-image of masculinity, because we figure reaching out for help makes us weak. And I used to think that all the time too. Pride goes before the fall. I still have my moments of being stubborn. I will admit that. But mind you, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither will breaking bad habits. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes time. But some things it takes longer than others. It is what it's got to be. And it's very painful because I will admit it, like I said earlier. It really sucks being lonely. It really sucks that, the other day, a friend mentioned how he couldn't stand going home to his wife and kids and how they get on his nerves. This was a customer at my weekend job, and I looked at him and I said, I would give anything to be that guy to come home to a wife and kid And even though at first it may seem like a pain in the butt and all that, but it's just that acceptance, that emptiness, that love that people like me inside crave for, even though we carry this image of what we will never have, never want, and never want to endure, never want to go through. Like as many times I've said it, and you know what? I'll go out and open and say it. I kept saying I never want to get married and I never want to have kids when deep down inside I do. Well, guess what? Due to years of steroid abuse, I can't produce. I'm sterile. So I only can probably pull off one. And even that, because of the disabled complexes that I've seen, felt, endured, is that what I really want? Do I really want to be married? You know, I've seen people, the most on average I've seen couples stay married is less than, 5 to 7 years. And then after that, it just doesn't work out. And I always keep wondering, am I going to be that guy? Why bother? It's a very tender subject, and for any man out there in my shoes, or any person out there, and I'm not just saying men, women too, but the only reason why I'm pushing men more because we're too stubborn to go out and get help. Because once again, we're more worried about our image. But if you're a man who is going through a situation similar to mine, I advise you, go out and get help. So what if your friends, family, colleagues, they give you shit about it? Let them. Because at the end of the day, when you leave your areas, you leave your jobs, you go home, it's just you. And when your time is done and you're gone from this world, guess what? It's just you in that coffin. And that is a crazy reality that we all have to, hear. But it's true. Or at least in my view, it's true. My Cook Guys podcast fans, this feels like opening up Pandora's box because of situations like this, because it's one of those situations where people probably didn't know that, times have gotten so bad, and people say, whenever you're going through a bad situation, somebody's going through worse. That's true, but sometimes that person who's going through worse is in a better position than I am, and what's worse to them is the norm for me. What's the norm to me is probably worse for them. So in honesty, we can't really say that. Just like a lot of you people didn't know a month and a half ago, and a few people knew about it. I tried attempting once again. And you know what I'm talking about when I say try attempting once again. And it's one of those things where you don't want to brag about it, but I ended up seeking out the help that I need, finally. Because sometimes it takes people small wake-up calls versus that big, giant wake-up call. Because inside I was saying to myself, I just hate being alone. I just hate going through those things of, people can say one thing, but they're not in my shoes. And I still go with that theory. Just like I'm not in their shoes, I don't know their situations. But it's crazy because, once again, it's just that image we carry. It's so bad because it can eat a person up inside. But like I said before, anyone who's in the same position, been in the same position, still fighting to get out of that position, Keep fighting. It's not hard. Well, yeah, it is hard. I don't even know why that even came out. Because, yeah, it is hard. I think it's just me trying to say that to myself. It's not hard. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be fine. When half of the time I feel like I'm not going to be okay. I'm not going to be fine. But I just, it's one of those things. It's just like when you're a kid and you're trying to watch a horror movie with your parents and they put the blanket over your head saying, we don't want you to see this because we don't want you to have nightmares. That's pretty much how I feel. So please, if you don't listen to your family, if you don't listen to your friends, listen to this podcast, this episode. Because this is a big step for me, opening up about this. Admitting so many things that I never admitted to before. And I've seen friends who went through that dark path as well. And I've always been that person that's been like, man, it's going to be all right, man. I'll be there. Not knowing what I'm going through as well is just as bad, if not worse. Or at least worse to me. It's just painful. But at the same time, as painful as it is, none of you guys ever notice it because I don't expose it. And I don't plan to. But that was before I cut that record button to start this episode. So I'm sure by the time people listen to this episode, they'll probably have a different outlook on me. That's cool. I can live with that. I just don't want to live that lie of hiding behind a mask. That being said, this is Mike Cook signing off on this new episode of the Mike Cook Guys podcast for season 6. And I'll see you on the next episode, whenever that may be.